The peak of Cahokia, when power ruled the Mississippi. At its height, Cahokia was not just a city, it was a symbol of dominance. Around 1100 AD, the city reached a level of complexity unseen anywhere else in North America. From above, Cahokia would have looked astonishing. Massive earthen mounds rose from the ground like artificial hills. Wide plazas stretched between them, carefully aligned with the sun and stars. Wooden buildings, homes, storage houses, and ceremonial structures filled the space between. This was not accidental growth. Cahokia was planned. At the heart of this plan stood Monk's Mound, a structure so massive that even today it defies belief. Its construction required millions of basket loads of soil carried by hand over generations. Who commanded such labor? Who organized such effort? The answer lies in power. Cahokia was ruled by an elite class, leaders who likely combined political authority with religious control. From the summit of Monk's Mound, these rulers could oversee the entire city. Power was visible. Hierarchy was unavoidable. Archaeological discoveries suggest that elite residences stood near the central mounds, while common people lived farther away. Status was measured by location, access, and ritual importance. Cahokia was not equal. It was ordered. A city fueled by corn and control. Agriculture was the foundation of Cahokia's rise. Corn was not just food, it was power. By mastering large-scale maize cultivation, Cahokia's leaders ensured food surplus. Surplus meant population growth. Population growth meant labor. Labor meant monuments. But food also meant dependence. Those who controlled storage and distribution controlled the people. Fields stretched far beyond the city center, worked by farmers who likely paid tribute to the elite. This system allowed Cahokia to support tens of thousands, year after year. For a time, it worked perfectly. Cahokia and the world beyond. Cahokia was not isolated in the wilderness. It was deeply connected to distant lands. Artifacts tell the story. Copper arrived from the Great Lakes region. Shells traveled from the Gulf Coast. Stone tools came from hundreds of miles away. These were not random trades. They were organized networks. Cahokia sat at the center of North America's river systems, turning geography into advantage. The Mississippi was not a boundary, it was a highway. Ideas traveled with goods, beliefs traveled with traders. Cahokia's influence spread far beyond its borders. Some archaeologists believe Cahokia was the spiritual capital of a much larger cultural world. Faith, fear, and ceremony. Religion shaped every aspect of Cahokian life. Ceremonial plazas hosted massive gatherings. Astronomical structures, often called woodhenges, tracked the movement of the sun. These alignments reinforced the belief that rulers held cosmic authority. Burial mounds revealed darker truths. Some graves show signs of human sacrifice, young individuals buried together, carefully arranged. These were not acts of chaos, they were rituals. Sacrifice reinforced power. It reminded the population that the elite ruled not only the land, but the spiritual world. For centuries, this system held Cahokia together. But systems built on control are fragile. And cracks were beginning to form.
Cahokia did not collapse in a single moment. There was no great invasion, no sudden firestorm, no final battle recorded in legend. Instead, its fall began quietly, almost invisibly. For generations, life in Cahokia had followed a rhythm. The seasons came and went, crops were planted and harvested, ceremonies were performed. Leaders ruled from the heights of Monk's Mound. The people believed the order of the world was fixed. But beneath this appearance of stability, something had begun to change. The land begins to push back. The forests surrounding Cahokia were disappearing. What had once been thick woodland was now open land, cut for fuel, construction, and farming. At first, this expansion seemed like progress. More fields meant more corn meant more people. But the soil had limits. Without tree roots to hold it in place, the earth began to erode. Rainfall washed nutrients away. Fields that once produced reliable harvests became unpredictable. Then came the floods. The Mississippi River, which had allowed Cahokia to rise, now threatened its survival. Seasonal flooding grew more severe. Farmlands near the river were damaged or destroyed. Storage pits, once full, became dangerously empty. Food shortages did not happen all at once. They came in cycles, and cycles create fear. Population pressure and silent tension. Cahokia was crowded. Tens of thousands of people lived within and around the city. Homes were packed tightly together. Waste accumulated. Disease spread more easily. Archaeological evidence shows signs of declining health among the population. Malnutrition increased, lifespans shortened, infant mortality rose. These were not just biological problems. They were social ones. When resources become scarce, inequality becomes visible. The elite still lived near the central mounds. They still conducted ceremonies. They still claimed divine authority. But for many ordinary people, daily life was becoming harder. Faith weakens when Thomases go unfulfilled. The rise of fear and fortification. At some point, Cahokia changed the way it saw itself. Massive wooden palisades were constructed around the city's core. These were not symbolic structures. They were defensive walls, rebuilt multiple times. This raises an uncomfortable question. Who were they afraid of? Some scholars believe the threat came from outside, rival groups reacting to Cahokia's dominance. Others suggest the danger was internal, rebellion, unrest, or social fracture. Weapons became more common. Skeletal remains show signs of increased violent injury. The peaceful ceremonial center of earlier centuries had become a guarded city. Fear had entered the system. Rituals grow darker. When societies face crisis, they often turn inward, toward belief. In Cahokia, religious rituals intensified. More elaborate ceremonies were performed. Greater sacrifices were made. Burials from this period revealed disturbing patterns. Young individuals placed together, carefully arranged, possibly killed as part of ritual acts. These were not acts of madness. They were acts of control. By offering human lives to the spiritual world, leaders attempted to restore balance, or at least the appearance of power. But desperation is not the same as authority. Leadership without answers. Cahokia's rulers had long claimed cosmic legitimacy. They were intermediaries between the people and the forces of the universe. The sun, the seasons, the harvest, all were said to align with their rule. But when floods destroyed fields, when crops failed, when sickness spread, those claims rang hollow. Leadership systems that rely on divine favor face a unique danger. Failure becomes heresy. As trust eroded, loyalty weakened. Some communities began to drift away, physically and socially. They moved to smaller settlements. They followed rivers to new lands. They stopped participating in ceremonies. The city did not collapse. It thinned. The breaking of trade networks. Cahokia's power depended on connection. Trade routes brought materials, ideas, and prestige. But as the city's stability declined, these networks weakened. Goods arrived less frequently. Exotic materials became rare. The flow of influence slowed. Without trade, Cahokia lost its position as a continental hub. Isolation followed. Neighborhoods fall silent. Archaeologists have uncovered entire sections of Cahokia that were gradually abandoned. Homes left standing, tools left behind, no signs of violence, just absence. This suggests a slow departure rather than a sudden flight. Families likely left with intention, seeking better land, safer communities, and more reliable futures. Each departure weakened the city further. Population decline meant less labor. Less labor meant fewer repairs. Fewer repairs meant faster decay. The weight of complexity. Cahokia was a victim of its own success. Its systems, agricultural, political, religious, had grown too complex to adapt quickly. What once allowed it to dominate now made it fragile. Large populations require stability. Large monuments require maintenance. Large belief systems require trust. When those elements break down, recovery becomes nearly impossible. The beginning of the end. By the early 1300s, Cahokia was no longer the city it had been. Monk's Mound still stood, but fewer people climbed its slopes. Plazas still existed, but ceremonies were smaller, quieter. Walls still surrounded the core, but fewer defenders stood watch. The heart of the city was beating slower. and soon it would stop.
By the middle of the 14th century, Cahokia was no longer a city in the way it once had been. It still existed, but only in fragments. Where thousands of voices once filled the plazas, there was now silence. Where rituals once aligned with the sun and stars, there was neglect. Where power once flowed from Monk's Mound, there was emptiness. The collapse of Cahokia was not dramatic, it was quiet, and that quiet is what makes it haunting. A city that was left behind. People did not flee Cahokia in panic. There is no archaeological evidence of sudden destruction, no layers of ash from massive fires, no mass graves from warfare. Instead, the signs point to something far more unsettling. They walked away. Homes were left intact, tools were abandoned where they lay, fields were no longer planted. This suggests that people left gradually, deliberately, perhaps even reluctantly. Families likely debated the decision for years. They watched crops fail, they saw leaders lose authority, they felt the city's pulse weaken, and one by one, they chose survival over tradition. The final years of Monk's Mound. Monk's Mound, the symbolic heart of Cahokia, did not fall, it was simply forgotten. Construction stopped before it was fully completed. Erosion began to reshape its sides. Structures at its summit decayed without maintenance. For generations, this mound had represented cosmic order and political power. Now it stood as a monument without meaning. No rulers climbed it, no ceremonies restored its purpose. Power had no center anymore. Where did the people go? The people of Cahokia did not vanish. They dispersed. Some moved south along the Mississippi. Others traveled east or west, forming new communities. Their descendants would later become part of the diverse indigenous cultures encountered by Europeans centuries later. But something was lost in the dispersal. Cahokia's centralized system, its architecture, its authority, its scale, was never rebuilt. The memory of the city faded with each generation. Stories shortened, details disappeared. Eventually, even the name was forgotten. Nature reclaims the city. Without human maintenance, nature moved quickly. Wooden buildings rotted, palisade walls collapsed, grasses and trees overtook plazas. Floodwaters reshaped the landscape. Animals nested where crowds once gathered. Within a few generations, Cahokia no longer looked like a city. It looked like land. This transformation would later mislead those who arrived centuries afterward. The arrival of the Europeans. When European explorers reached the Mississippi Valley in the 16th and 17th centuries, they saw no great city. They saw mounds, large unnatural hills scattered across the landscape. But rather than recognizing them as the remains of an advanced civilization, many Europeans dismissed them or misunderstood them entirely. Some claimed the mounds were natural formations. Others invented myths, suggesting they were built by lost civilizations from elsewhere. The truth was uncomfortable. Acknowledging Cahokia meant admitting that a complex, powerful society had existed in North America long before European arrival. So the truth was ignored. Erasure through assumption. For centuries, Cahokia remained absent from mainstream history. Its builders were underestimated, its achievements minimized, its existence questioned. This erasure was not accidental. It fit a narrative that claimed the land was empty or underutilized before colonization. Cahokia challenged that idea completely. A city larger than London at the time, a population rivaling European capitals, sophisticated planning without metal tools or written language. And yet it was left out of the story. Rediscovery and shock. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that serious archaeological work began at Cahokia. Excavations revealed the scale of what had been lost. Layer by layer, the city emerged from the soil. Mounds aligned with celestial events, trade goods from distant regions, evidence of social structure, religion, and engineering. Historians were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about pre-Columbian North America. Cahokia was not an anomaly. It was proof. What Cahokia teaches us. Cahokia's disappearance was not caused by a single failure. It was the result of interconnected pressures, environmental damage, resource exhaustion, social inequality, rigid leadership, loss of trust. Its story mirrors the fate of many civilizations across history. Growth without balance, power without adaptation, complexity without resilience. Cahokia did not fall because it was primitive. It fell because it was advanced. A city without a voice. Perhaps the most tragic part of Cahokia's story is silence. No written language recorded its fears. No chronicles described its final days. No names of rulers survived. Their people lived, struggled, adapted, and were forgotten. All that remain are the mounds. Quiet, unmoving, patient. They remind us that history does not always end with fire and conquest. Sometimes it ends with people leaving, and no one remembering why.
Cahokia is gone. Its people dispersed, its power dissolved, its voice silenced by time. And yet, Cahokia is not truly dead. It lives on, not as a city, but as a a lesson written not in words, but in earth. The mounds that refuse to disappear. Today, the land where Cahokia once stood looks calm. Grassy fields stretch beneath open skies, birds pass overhead. The Mississippi flows as it always has. But rising from this quiet landscape are the mounds. They are still massive, still deliberate, still impossible to ignore. Monk's Mound remains the largest earthen structure in North America. Even after centuries of erosion, it dominates the horizon. It is proof that something extraordinary once existed here, and that proof cannot be erased. Rediscovering a forgotten genius. Modern archaeology transformed Cahokia from mystery into reality. Careful excavation revealed urban planning on a massive scale, astronomical knowledge embedded in architecture, political systems capable of mobilizing thousands, trade networks spanning half a continent. This was not a simple society. It was sophisticated, organized, visionary. Cahokia forces us to rethink what civilization truly means. Stone and writing are not the only measures of intelligence. Power and progress take many forms. Why Cahokia still matters. Cahokia's story resonates because it mirrors patterns we see again and again. Civilizations rise when resources are abundant. They thrive when systems remain flexible. They fall when growth outpaces balance. Cahokia expanded rapidly, too rapidly. Its leaders built monuments, not solutions. They reinforced authority instead of adapting structure. They responded to crisis with ritual, not reform. These choices are not ancient. They are human. A mirror for the modern world. Cahokia's callus feels uncomfortably familiar. Environmental damage, resource depletion, social inequality, centralized power disconnected from reality. These are not problems of the past. They are warnings. Cahokia reminds us that complexity is fragile, that dominance does not equal permanence, that no society, no matter how advanced, is immune to collapse. The silence between the stories. One of the most powerful aspects of Cahokia's legacy is what we do not know. We do not know the names of its rulers. We do not know the final debates of its people. We do not know the moment they decided to leave. History often remembers conquerors. Cahokia left behind no conqueror, only absence. And in that absence, we are forced to listen. Memory carved in earth. Unlike stone cities that crumble into ruins, Cahokia dissolved into the land itself. Its buildings returned to soil. Its plazas became fields. Its streets vanished beneath grass. But the mounds endured. They stand as reminders that memory does not always survive in books. Sometimes it survives in shame, in shadow, in elevation, in silence. Why we must remember Cahokia. For centuries, Cahokia was excluded from history, not because it was insignificant, but because it challenged assumptions. Remembering Cahokia is an act of correction. It restores agency to the people who built it. It acknowledges complexity where it was denied. It expands our understanding of the human past. And it reminds us that history is not owned by those who wrote it, but by those who lived it. Final reflection. Cahokia rose without metal, without wheels, without writing, and yet it became one of the greatest cities of its time. Its fall was not a failure of intelligence, it was a failure of balance. The earth remembers what humans forget. The mounds remain, quiet, patient, unjudging. They wait for us to learn. Because the story of Cahokia is not just about a city that vanished. It is about civilizations everywhere, including ours.